I want you to look at a few minutes of a documentary that the Mr. Executive Producer put together after watching over an hour of tape about the Weather Underground. The Weather Underground was a movement, interestingly enough, that grew out of the same man who is the founding father of critical race theory. And if you've read American Marxism, you'll know all about this. His name was Herbert Marcuse, who came into the United States, escaped Nazi Germany, was a communist in Germany, not exactly a democratic freedom fighter. He comes to the United States, and how does he show his gratitude? He moves hard and pushes hard a Marxist movement within the United States. He's not particularly bright. He's not among the smartest of the Marxists, but he was bright enough. And he had enormous influence. And the New Left movement, which spawned the Weather Underground, the Black Panther movement, these other movements, was actually spawned by him. And later he would spawn critical theory that resulted in the development of critical race theory. Herbert Marcuse is his name, again, to underscore it. So there are connections. And at the end of all this, I'll tell you of another connection, which kind of puts the whole thing in full circle and underscores my point that this is American Marxism. This is a form of Marxism that is tailored to America. So let me show you a montage of different aspects of this documentary that was put together in 2003, the Free History Project. Go.
A federal grand jury in Detroit today charged the 13 top leaders of the Weathermen with plotting to bomb public buildings in Chicago, Detroit, New York, and Berkeley, California. The Weathermen are the militant faction of the Students for a Democratic Society. Only one of the 13 is now in custody.
At 7:30 this morning, KPFK received a call from a woman identifying herself as a member of the Weather Underground.
Hello. I'm going to read a declaration of a state of war. This is the first communication from the Weatherman Underground. Kids know the lines are drawn. Revolution is touching all of our lives. Freaks are revolutionaries, and revolutionaries are freaks. If you want to find us, this is where we are. In every tribe, commune, dormitory, farmhouse, barracks, and townhouse, where kids are making love, smoking dope, and loading guns, fugitives from American justice are free to go. Within the next 14 days, we will attack a symbol or institution of American injustice.
The FBI said the Weather Underground organization, which took credit for the bombing, is the same radical group which was responsible for the bombing of the U.S. Capitol in 1971 and the Pentagon in 1972. But federal officials don't really know much about the group, which is believed to have between 20 and 30 members.
My name is Bernadine Dorn, and I was part of the Weather Underground.
Bernadine Dorn is the wife of Bill Ayers. And, of course, they were both part of the Weather Underground. Bill Ayers' original girlfriend died as she was making bombs with one of his best friends. So they both blew themselves up. Go ahead.
Well, it's hard to say when it started, 1970 to 1980. It was underground for 11 years.
There's no way to be committed to nonviolence in the middle of the most violent society that history's ever created. I'm not committed to nonviolence in any way.
I'm a teacher now in a community college, and
this guy is another piece of you-know-what, part of the Weather Underground. Go ahead.
Occasionally bring up the war in Vietnam and ask me what my involvement was. And I'll say, well, I helped found an organization whose goal was the violent overthrow of the government of the United States. And my students would look at me as if I'm from another planet.
This system is going to be overthrown. It's going to mean a fight. And it's going to mean a lot of white people risking a lot of things when they finally join on the side of the black people and the people of Vietnam and around the world who've already begun the fight.
My brother was drafted. My brother was in the service. So it wasn't something that was abstract. It was something that was concrete.
Now remember, Bill Ayers helped launch Barack Obama's career. He was very close to Michelle and Barack Obama for many years. Go ahead.
And affected us personally and directly.
Raising total U.S. combat fatalities in this country's longest war to 30,057. U.S.
To really see that these were real people with mothers and fathers and children, brothers and sisters, and they were being killed or maimed or destroyed. Then opposing the war became something that was urgent and immediate.
150 battle deaths.
The sense was that we had to do whatever we had to do in order to stop the war.
Has been and continues to be opposition to the war in Vietnam on the campuses and also in the nation. However, under no circumstances will I be affected whatever by it.
This nation is in a state of turmoil perhaps unparalleled in our history. Poverty amidst wealth, widespread racism, and bewilderment over a strange war are the seeds of the revolution. Nurturing these seeds are a coalition of dedicated revolutionaries working to exploit our weaknesses for the ultimate destruction of the United States system of government as we know it.
These racist Gestapo pigs have to stop brutalizing our community, or we're going to take up guns, we're going to drive them out.
If you look back at it and see a bunch of crazy young people roaming around trying to tell people that the revolution is coming, it seems totally insane. And in some ways it was totally insane, but it fit into a period of revolution in the whole world. It seemed to me that we were entering an incredible period of revolution, and I didn't want to miss it. I wanted to be part of it.
Fun to be part of it. And it had more to do than just Vietnam, by the way. As I say, this was a comprehensive mentality, a Marxist mentality. Go ahead.
We're in a revolution. Don't ever say we're going into a revolution. We're in a revolution. Now the question is, who's going to win it?
Toward the end of 1968, I had really decided that I was committed to being a part of what I thought was going to be a really serious and ongoing rebellion, upheaval that had the potential of not just ending the war, but of really overthrowing the capitalist system and put in its place something much more humane.
Yes, something much more humane. The Marxist movements are always more humane, aren't they, than the capitalist movement? So it's only near the end there that you hear it's not just about the Vietnam War, it's the capitalist movement. So you'll want to know more about Herbert Marcuse, and you'll find it in the American Marxism book, because, again, he was the one who really gave birth to this new left violent movement. And he was the one who gave birth to critical theory, which then became critical race theory. And they're always violent, as a matter of fact. Now, given what's going on Capitol Hill, I want you to know a few things. First of all, Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter now that's being celebrated by the Democrat Party and mayors throughout America, celebrated by American corporatists, celebrated by LeBron James and others in professional sports, celebrated by a whole lot of people. One of the people behind it and funding it, in part, is Susan Rosenberg. As pointed out by Dan Flynn in the American Spectator, Susan Rosenberg was an extremely violent and dangerous domestic terrorist. The last day of his presidency, Bill Clinton granted a full pardon to Susan Rosenberg 16 years into a 58-year sentence for possession of guns and over 700 pounds of explosives. A member of the Weather Underground and numerous of its succeeding splinter groups, Rosenberg allegedly participated in the 1983 bombing of the U.S. Capitol. The explosion blew off, as you heard, Senate Minority Leader Robert Byrd's door, ripped through a painting of Daniel Webster, and damaged the Senate cloakroom. She was involved in more than that, by the way. She made the FBI's most wanted list by the time she was 29, as you heard. Among the most prominent far-left revolutionary activists in the U.S. earlier in the summer, she sparked controversy. You know why? Well, she's out, of course, thanks to Bill Clinton. After it was discovered that she purportedly sat on the board as vice chair of Thousand Currents, ringing a bell, which has poured more than $10 million into grassroots social change initiatives, including Black Lives Matter. Now, you see, I told you about Herbert Marcuse and the New Left movement, Herbert Marcuse and critical theory, the philosophy that undergirds critical race theory. And here we have Susan Rosenberg, part of the New Left, the Weather Underground, which considers Marcuse the original brain trust, if you will, of their movement. They were very taken by him, particularly his book, One Dimensional Man. I read it. You don't have to. It is a mess. And in addition, Rosenberg now has been helping to fund Black Lives Matter, which is an avowedly Marxist group. And so Black Lives Matter is celebrated all across this country by Democrats, particularly by Mitt Romney, as a matter of fact, as I recall. This is why I wrote the book. This is why we need to understand who our enemies are, because this is pernicious. The nonprofit, formerly known as IDEX, IDEX, quickly removed the director's page featuring Rosenberg from its website in June. It remained unclear if and to what capacity she still serves the organization. Thousand Currents did not immediately respond to Fox News requests for comment. Okay, so they moved her name off. Big deal. We know who she is now, don't we? And that's not the only situation. Talking about January 6th, that it's the worst attack on our democracy since 9/11. Just remember, anything that comes out of Joe Biden's mouth is either 1, stupid, or 2, incoherent, or 3, both. Let us remember there have been other attacks on the Capitol building. In fact, in 1978, the head of a Puerto Rican terrorist group who led an attack on the House of Representatives. 1978, this terrorist had cancer and Jimmy Carter let him out of prison. In 1970, Jimmy Carter released from prison 3 of additional terrorists associated with this Puerto Rican terrorist nationalist group. And what did they do in 1954? They shot up the House gallery. They shot 5 people, including members of the House of Representatives. They shot them. 5 people were wounded. That seems to me a pretty big deal, and yet, in the end, Jimmy Carter pardoned all of them, let them all out of prison. Rosenberg, who we just talked about, what happened to her? President Bill Clinton, on the last day of his presidency, Bill Clinton granted a full pardon to her, as I mentioned earlier. Full pardon. Only did 16 years of her 58-year service. And you saw Bill Ayers up there. You know who Bill Ayers is. A year after Bill Ayers' girlfriend and 2 of his friends blew themselves up at a Greenwich Village townhouse turned bomb factory, he took part in the 1971 bombing of the U.S. Capitol. He got off on a technicality. But he still brags about it. He wrote in his book, about himself, of course, his memoir, "We already bombed the Capitol, and we cased the White House. The Pentagon was like 2 of the trifecta. They hit the Pentagon, actually. They weren't able to hit the White House. They hit the Capitol. That's Bill Ayers. Bill Ayers, one of Barack Obama's closest friends and political allies who launched his career. So you have Carter pardoning terrorists who attacked the Capitol building. You have Clinton pardoning a terrorist who attacked the Capitol building. You have Obama, who's best buddies with Bill Ayers, who was involved in attacking the Capitol building and the Pentagon. And now we're supposed to believe that Donald Trump incited an insurrection at the Capitol building.
Want to see more? Sign up for LevinTV.